feel like I'm zero fun today. The whole purpose of this is to have fun. So I live close enough to New Orleans where people around here celebrate Mardi Gras. This year, which is 2025, somehow the calendar for Mardi Gras lines up with Easter. I don't totally understand it, nor do I really understand what Mardi Gras celebrates. I'll Google that later. People have been talking about Mardi Gras since New Year's, and we are almost at the end of February now. I believe it's going to happen sometime in March, but it's just been a really long period of time that people have been talking about king cakes and going to get king cakes. So that's what we're going to make today is a king cake. Oddly enough, king cake is actually not cake at all. It's bread. It is an enriched dough, but I guess king bread, it does not have the same ring to it. I've eaten my fair share of king cake in my day, and so I thought I need to learn how to make that. It does require a lot of steps. So you're going to make your dough, and then you're going to make two different fillings, and then you're going to put all that together. You're going to braid it together, and then you're going to bake it. And then there's an icing that goes on top. We're going to try it, and we're going to see if it works. I'm very excited about it. We're going to start with the dough. So we'll start that, and then we'll do a couple of the other things while the dough is rising. Initially, the ingredients you're going to need are all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, vanilla, eggs, cinnamon, whole milk, butter, yeast, and the zest of a lemon. A couple of things to note in the recipe, which will be down in the description below. You're going to want to pull out your butter and your cream cheese and your eggs a good 2 hours before you start this recipe because those are going to need to be at room temperature. I got this recipe online. I will absolutely give the girl credit for it. I did not make this up. I just found it and thought this is exactly what I want to try to make. It looks delicious. So let's get going. We'll move over to this side of the kitchen and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is bloom our yeast. We need to take a cup of whole milk and pour it in a saucepan on a stove over low heat. We're going to need this to heat up to around 100 to 110 degrees. This won't take very long at all. I would recommend doing it on the stove because you do have a little bit more control over the temperature as opposed to doing it in the microwave. If you want to, you can use an instant read thermometer for this. I would highly recommend it if you have one. Once the milk reaches between 100 and 110 degrees, we're going to take it off the stove, pour that milk into the bowl of our stand mixer. After we pour the milk into the bowl, we're going to take 1 packet of active dry yeast and sprinkle it over the top of the warm milk. That 1 packet has 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast in it. The recipe calls for 2½ teaspoons, but I decided just to use the 1 packet for this. We're going to let that sit for 10 minutes so that the yeast can bloom. While our yeast is blooming, we're going to prep a couple of the other ingredients. We're going to need to zest 1 whole lemon. Once you zest that, set the lemon aside because you're going to need the juice of that lemon later on in the recipe. The next thing we're going to need is 600 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm using a kitchen scale here just for a little bit more accurate measure. All in all, it's about 4 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to take that and the lemon zest and set that aside. Another thing that you'll need to do during this time is melt 1 stick or a half a cup of butter in the microwave. It's best if you let it cool before you pour it into the mixture. Otherwise, there's a possibility that the warm butter and the eggs will react to each other and create scrambled eggs. And as much as I love scrambled eggs, they're not very good in cake. So set all of those ingredients aside, and we're going to go back over to our yeast that should have bloomed. Our yeast is bloomed, so now we're going to take the bowl and put it on the stand mixer. We're going to fit our mixer with the dough hook and add the rest of the ingredients. You're going to need 2 large room temperature eggs, a half a cup or 1 stick of melted butter, 1/4 cup of white granulated sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla extract. We're going to let that mix together Make sure that your egg yolks are broken up in there before you proceed. Once that's combined, you're going to start adding in your flour a little bit at a time. Just sprinkle it in a little at a time. Try not to dump the whole thing in at once. Once that's in there, you're going to need a teaspoon of cinnamon, and we're also going to add in our lemon zest. Once that's all been added, we're going to let the dough hook mix it all together. And as it mixes, it's going to start to form a ball. If you have any ingredients that are sticking to the side of the bowl, then you're just going to need to take a spatula and scrape that down. Once all of that's incorporated and the ball seems pretty well shaped and is pretty smooth, then stop your mixer and test it to see if the dough is a little bit sticky. This looks just about right. So I'm going to pull it and we're going to head back over to our work surface to knead the dough. Okay, so we're back over to our work surface, and the first thing we're going to do is take some olive oil and just give it a little bit down in a bowl, just very, very little bit. And then you're going to take a paper towel and just grease the sides of the bowl. Just make sure it's good and covered. This is the bowl that your dough is going to proof in, and you don't want it to be sticking. So just make sure it's good and covered. We're going to set it aside. Now we're going to roll our sleeves up. We're going to lightly flour our work surface. We're going to take our dough out of our mixer and plop it down. It smells so good. This dough smells like cinnamon and lemon. Okay, so now we're just going to knead the dough until it gets elastic. So you're just trying to build up the elasticity in it. The recipe says to do this for about 3 or 4 minutes. Hey Siri, set a timer for 3 minutes. I'm having no trouble with it sticking. Mine is not a particularly sticky dough. I don't know if that's good or bad. I guess we'll see. I will say one thing I'm noticing is there are little bits of egg. Remember how I mentioned don't pour your eggs into the hot mixture without tempering them? I'm wondering if they did scramble a little. Hopefully it won't make too much of a difference. This dough smells so amazing. All right, so we probably did that for 3 minutes. Now we're going to take the dough, we're going to put it into our greased bowl, like so, like that, and we're going to cover it up with a damp tea towel, and we're going to set it in a warm place for an hour. My house is old and doesn't have a lot of warm spaces, so where I'm going to put it is in my oven off. The oven will be off, but with the light on. So it makes it a little bit warmer in there. It usually is a pretty good place for dough to rise. So we're going to set that in there for an hour, and we'll work on some of the other elements while that's rising in the warm space. One thing you're going to need once the dough is out and we've rolled it out is we're going to need 1.5 sticks of butter to be very soft. We don't want it to be melted, but we want it to be soft enough that we can spread it on the dough. So I'm actually going to stick it in on this paper plate in the microwave for maybe 5 seconds or less. I don't want it to melt. I don't want there to be liquid coming out of it, but I do want it to be spreadable. I need it to be spreadable. So after 5 seconds in the microwave, like it's very soft but not melted. I'm going to go ahead and squish all of this so that it's ready for me to spread. I should probably reiterate that this is not in the recipe. This is just what I'm doing because I'm like, how can I make this easier for myself once I get to that point in the recipe? So squishing the butter is not a step in the official recipe from our sweet friend Lauren LeBlanc. What in the tarnation is that? I love butter. I used to just eat butter on white bread when I was a kid. Man, I love that stuff. All right, I love this. It just makes it so much easier to spread when that time comes here in just a little bit. So while our dough is in the oven proofing or wherever your warm spot is, we're going to mix up the cinnamon filling and we're also going to make the cream cheese filling. This first step is really easy. We're just going to mix up the cinnamon mixture that's going to go on the inside. It's just a few ingredients. It's just brown sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg. So we're gonna mix all this up in a small bowl. I'm gonna do dark brown sugar. So that's half a cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. I always get tickled at ingredients I don't use a lot. So I was like, I wonder when this expired. March 1st of 14. We're gonna use it. I don't care. 1/4 of a teaspoon of that. 2014 was a good year for me. I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked for NASCAR, and it was a great year. We're just going to mix this up with, I'm going to use the tablespoon that I used to measure out my cinnamon. One thing that you'll notice about me is I want as little cleanup as possible. If y'all can hear my dog barking, I'm so sorry. There's probably a cat walking by that she is trying to say hello to. Indy. Hey, Indy. Hush. Just stir it up real good and set it aside. Next thing is our cream cheese filling, which we're going to have to go back over to the mixer for. The first thing we're going to do over here is juice our lemon. We only need a teaspoon of lemon juice, so I'm only going to juice 1/2 of this lemon. The next thing we're going to do is add in 2 blocks or 16 ounces of softened cream cheese to our stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment. We're going to turn the mixer on, and then we're going to add in 1 cup of white granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. We're going to turn the mixer up and let it get really smooth. We're going to scrape down the sides as we need to. Once this is mixed up really well and has gotten really smooth, we're going to remove it from the stand and bring it back over to our work surface. Now we're going to take that cream cheese mixture. We're going to make sure it's all good and combined, scrape the bottom. It is it's not very firm, and you don't want it to be necessarily, but just be aware of that. Like, you're not looking for something that's going to not be jiggly. See, it's kind of wiggly. Now I have large piping bags because I decorate cakes, so I have to have these. You can use a Ziploc bag, a gallon Ziploc bag. We're going to transfer this mixture into whatever bag you choose. We're not going to cut the tip off yet though, because because it is sort of loose, we don't want it coming out before we need to use it. I always recommend folding the sides of your bag down, even if you're using the Ziploc bag, because that's going to give you to where like the icing or whatever you're using isn't going to get on the very ends, and it's just not going to be a big mess. Will I be licking all of the excess? Yes. We've just about scraped every bit of it out. See how we can just fold our edges up and they're not messy? So we're going to set this aside with our brown sugar cinnamon mixture and wait for our dough to continue to proof. So we'll see you then. Okay, our dough's been proofing for about an hour and it should have doubled in size. So we're going to go get it and we're going to see. Here comes the big reveal. Yes, look at that. It has doubled. So we're gonna, oh, it's so fun. It smells incredible. We're gonna turn this out onto a floured surface. Sprinkle a little flour. You are gonna have to roll this out pretty big, so you're gonna want your surface to be floured kind of a large space. The dough, in my opinion, wasn't super sticky, so I'm not terribly concerned about it, but I do want to make sure there's enough. So now we're gonna turn this out into this. And we're going to cut it in half because we need two pieces. I'm using a bench scraper. You can use a knife, whatever you got. We're going to set one of the pieces over to the side. And now we want to roll both of these out to 10 by 18 inch rectangles. So I'm going to kind of go ahead and get mine into the rectangle shape just to start that process. I find it easier to make the shape that you're trying to make when it starts out that shape. So again, you're going to want it to be 18 inches long and 10 inches wide. You know what? That's not egg in there. That's lemon zest. Idiot. Oh gosh. When you're rolling out the dough, just make sure you roll it slow. Okay, that's about Perfect. Squish down the ends just because I don't want it to be too thick on the edges as we inchworm our way over to the side here. Okay. Doing something for the first time is always hilarious. Because you're like, if and when I do that again, I will not be doing it like that. One down, one to go. Do exactly the same thing again with this one. Okay, I think we've got these rolled out approximately the right size. So now we're going to add the filling. So we're going to take the butter that we squished earlier and we're going to spread it on one side of the dough. And then we're going to take the other half and use it on the other piece of dough. This butter is going to act as a glue for the cinnamon sugar mixture, a flavor glue, obviously. There was a kid in my first grade class who used to eat glue. I guess he thought regular glue was flavorful. Now that the butter's on, we're going to take half of the cinnamon sugar mixture and we are going to sprinkle it on one side and half on the other. For anyone wondering, it ended up being about 8 tablespoons per side of dough. Now we're going to take our cream cheese mixture, which is in the piping bag, and cut the end off. We're going to pipe half of it onto this piece of dough. And then the other half on this side. Now we're going to roll this dough up from the long side. It rolls really easily, so this is great. We're just going to roll them up. Once they're rolled up, we're going to secure the seams by pinching them. I'm also going to use a little bit of water just to make those seams stick a little better. And make sure you get the ends because that's where the filling is going to want to come out. So I'm going to pinch and roll up my ends. We'll just do the same thing on this other side. Now that these are done, the next thing is going to be to elongate these pieces of dough. They actually need to be about 24 inches long. Since you're going to wrap them around each other, it's just necessary. So we've made them a little longer. I'm going to keep stretching them. They're pretty easy to just pull. So now that they're long enough, we're going to get a very large piece of parchment paper, which no one has said to do this. This is my own way of doing this. I'm going to go ahead and move these pieces of dough onto this parchment paper and connect the ends so that I can start the twisting. You're just going to take the dough and you're going to wrap it around the other piece of dough to make a wreath. It's actually pretty durable. It doesn't feel scary to do this. So we're just going to move it all around, make sure that the seams are tucked under, make a pretty little ball, a pretty little wreath with a hole in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of tin foil and spray it really well with baking spray and put it down in the middle of this so the dough doesn't collapse in on itself. So I've sprayed that really well with baking spray and we're going to put that down in there. I'm going to move this onto the cookie sheet, trim off some of the parchment paper. Once we've got it on the baking sheet, we're going to cover it with a damp towel and set it in a warm place to rise for 30 minutes. It's almost been 30 minutes. We're going to pull our bread out of the warm space that it's been in. But before we do that, we're going to make an egg wash. An egg wash is just 1 tablespoon of water and 1 egg. We're going to whisk those together. So now we have our egg wash ready. So we're going to pull our bread out of the warm space that it's been in for the last 30 minutes, and we're going to preheat our oven to 350. So the bread should have doubled in size again. Yeah, I would say that, and it's kind of come apart here at the seam, which I was kind of afraid of. So I'm just going to take it and stretch it and kind of tuck it under. So we're going to brush the egg wash on top of the bread. I probably won't use this whole egg wash. I'm just going to make sure that it's really good and covered. So after it goes in the oven, we have one final step, and that step is going to be to make the icing that goes on top. But you don't want to make the icing until your cake is already cooled. So we're going to bake the cake, then we're going to pull it out, and we're going to let it set and cool completely before we make the icing that goes on top, because it hardens as it sits. So you don't want to make it ahead of time because it would just be hard by the time it was time to put it on top of the bread. I keep calling it bread. It's cake. So we're going to stick it in the oven for 30 minutes. And once it is golden brown on top and you can stick a toothpick in it and it comes out clean, then it'll be ready to go. It's been 30 minutes, so let's pull it out of the oven. It smells delicious slash like burnt cinnamon. It's humongous. Oh my gosh. It's like massive. I need 135,000 friends that want to eat some cake. Look at that. It's huge. Oh, and it leaked. It sure did. Why is it so huge? So now it just has to cool before we can put the icing on the top. You think this is going to come out easy? Oh, yeah. It smells like a big old cinnamon roll. Oh, wait, let's. I'm so tickled at how big it is. We're going to let it cool and then we'll be back to do the icing. We're going to make the icing that's going to go on top of this. The recipe is a cup of powdered sugar and a tablespoon of milk. Which means it's going to be pretty thick. The recipe says that we should be able to pour this icing over the top of this. So I'm going to add more milk until I feel like I'm at a consistency that would be a little bit more runny, but not, I don't want it to be a complete liquid, but I do think that it needs to be a little runnier. Yeah. Like a drizzle. I'm going to set this aside. I actually have a cake board that I just happen to have because I do decorate cakes. And I'm going to put it on this. Much easier than I thought it was going to be. That was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. To decorate, we're going to use some sanding sugar. I happen to have gold, purple, and green, which are the colors that would be used. So we're going to drizzle the icing over the top, and then we're going to sprinkle that on. I could almost use double of that, the icing. I actually think I am going to make a little bit more. I made some more, and I'm going to cover this more than that original amount. So now we're going to alternate with our sprinkles. Green, gold, purple. It looks like a king cake, especially now that it's decorated. I'm going to cut into it and eat some of it. The question is, where does one start? Where does one cut from? Maybe like right there. Let's start here. It's much more, the texture is more substantial than I thought it was going to be. It's so much better on the inside than I thought it was going to be. I'm not exactly sure what I thought it was going to be, but that wasn't it. This is exciting. So it has the dough, which I think turned out great, and it's got this layer of cream cheese. I am pleasantly surprised. You get that very subtle hint of lemon. It's phenomenal. What a wonderful recipe. Really good. Really, really good. 10 out of 10 would make again. It tastes exactly like I wanted it to taste. Bravo. Bravo to Lauren for this recipe. Now I just need to find 100 friends to share this with. Thank you for watching again. This was really fun, and we'll come up with something really fun again next week. See you then.